Having set aside nationality problems for the time being, Stalin personally ran the wheat collection operation. His base of operations was in Tsaritsyn, the future Stalingrad. In June of 1918, the Man of Steel sent to Moscow its first load of provisions. In spite of the anti-Bolshevik troops being very active between Tsaritsyn and the capital city, Stalin was determined to restore the normal transport network and turned his assignment into a military mission. In 1919, the year the Civil War came to an end, Stalin was in Moscow where, together with Trotsky, he was given the top Soviet honor, the Order of the Red Banner. The first film about Stalin was made in 1922. He was a leading figure in the party, and the Russian people learned to become familiar with him. Stalin's speeches were recorded on a record and propagated in thousands of copies. They carried the leader's legend to all the villages, even the most remote. Stalin was well aware of the media's power. Comrade Joseph could be satisfied with the goals achieved. He was living in Moscow at the Kremlin with his new wife, Nadezhda Alueva, whom he married in 1918 following the death of Keke. She was a girl 21 years his junior, but had grown up in the revolutionary atmosphere and was proud of her husband's importance. She had all the intentions of remaining by his side during the construction of the new communist reality. Stalin fine-tuned the mechanisms of his bureaucratic posts. They were not impressive posts, but they gave him the reins of power without anyone noticing. As Commissar of Nationalities, he controlled almost half of the population of the former Russian Empire. As Commissar of Workers and Peasants' Inspection, he controlled the entire government machine. Stalin was also a member of the Politburo, the highest ruling body of the party. On April 3rd, 1922, he became Secretary General of the Central Committee of the party, the machinery of which he controlled after having ousted Trotsky and other Bolshevik leaders, who up until that time were more well-known and more influential than him. Lenin quit the political scene after suffering a stroke, which was followed by partial improvements and serious relapses. Lenin died on January 21st, 1924. It was a tragedy for the communist world, but an unhoped-for piece of luck for Stalin, who saw the road to absolute power open up before him. Lenin's spiritual testament contained a harsh criticism of Stalin, but the message was stifled by the fanfares that accompanied his coffin to the tomb, by the magniloquent speeches delivered by Stalin, who immediately gave vent to his thoughts about the cult of Lenin, sure that the advantage of the glorification would have fallen upon him, the pupil, the favorite. At the time, nobody feared him. Nobody had so much insight as to predict that the rough Georgian could one day become the master. Lev Trotsky was the primary person responsible for the opposition to Stalin. Following Lenin's death, he became the point of reference of a large revolutionary faction. 13th Congress of the Communist Party. Stalin proposed himself as Lenin's sole legitimate heir. In openly taking action against Trotsky, the number 2 man of the Bolshevik Revolution, Stalin had no difficulty in directing the goodwill and support of everyone afraid of Trotsky's dominance around him. The Zinoviev-Kamenev-Stalin triumvirate commanded a safe majority within the Politburo. The three systematically gave battle to Trotsky on the ideological level, aiming at making him appear the dissident, the deviationist. It was a fight with no holds barred. When Stalin realized that the battle could be fought by his colleagues, he put on an air of moderation, to the point of looking like the only one not being drawn into the intrigues, and entirely committed to working for the good of the country. The only intervention Stalin supervised in the anti-Trotsky controversy was a masterstroke. Against Lev Trotsky's permanent revolution, he came up with the theory of socialism in just one country, where he stressed that Russia's enormous resources, exploited by a proletarian government, could create socialist well-being in the country. The former empire became the Soviet Union, a federation that united a large number of nationalities and extremely different ethnic groups. The literacy program generated extraordinary results. Surrounded by a menacing capitalist world, according to Stalin and the majority of the party, it had to count on its own forces in order to turn itself into a great industrial power within only 10 years. It had to build a huge energy complex and give priority to the heavy and military industries, while sacrificing the industry of consumer goods and agriculture, meaning the well-being of the people. The entire economy was to be run by the state, which would decide on the time frame, methods and priorities of development. In the meantime, the struggle for succession continued in quick steps, and every step was a victory for Stalin. In 1925, the triumvirs forced Trotsky to resign from the Commissariat of War. While digging the grave of the creator of the Red Army, Zinoviev and Kamenev were also digging their own, because Stalin's plan envisaged that their jobs were finished and it was time for them to disappear. Joining forces with some in order to defeat others who were more dangerous, and then appealing to a second group of allies so as to overthrow the first, was a tactic that the Georgian native put into practice systematically during the 1920s in order to gain absolute power. His main rival was neutralized in 1928. Trotsky was brought to the train that was to take him into exile in shackles. Stalin started using Trotsky's name as a synonym of treason. Whoever dared to put up resistance was neutralized. Nobody dared to criticize him openly any longer. He transformed a party dictatorship into a personal dictatorship. He then went on to subject the people to his will. Russian history opens onto the Stalin era, marked by the cult of personality, by 5-year plans, and by the rapid transformation of the backward rural country into an industrial power.